Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah if you're new here, and it is time. It is the end of 2021 and we're gonna talk about some books that I did not love. This video is the books that I rated the lowest, the books that I did not like, the books that were not for me. The reason I'm making this video, I kind of went back and forth as to what's the purpose of this video. And I came to the conclusion that I think these books do have an audience, but I am not the intended audience, or it just didn't fit with my personal taste. So if I talk about these books and I'm talking about things that I didn't like, maybe those are reasons for you to pick up these books. You know, you love that trope or you love that character dynamic, but I don't. So, you know, it might pique your interest. So while these books weren't my favorite, maybe they will spark interest in you. Without further ado, let's talk about my 10 least favorite books of the year. Coming in at number 10 is Guild by Raven Kennedy. I saw this on TikTok. This was totally a TikTok inspired read for me, and this is a King Midas fairy tale retelling where our main character is completely made of gold because she's been touched by Midas, and she's the only person to like survive being touched by Midas, because otherwise people turn into pure gold and they turn into statues. And she's the only one who has survived, and she is also his prisoner. The book series is called the Plated Prisoner series. This was marketed to me as a romance series, a dark romance series, and this was one of the things that I was like kind of intrigued by. I was like, okay, so we've got this main character, she's trapped, the king is kind of an asshole. Where is the romance? What is this romance going to be? And in the first book, there is zero romance. It is about her, and she's in the cage, and she's getting taken advantage of, and the king is an asshole to her, and no one likes her except for the king, and there is one thing that I did enjoy about this book. It is incredibly readable and an incredibly fast read. I was like really intrigued by what was going to happen next, but in no way, shape, or form is there a true romance in this book, which is what I was looking for. I'm assuming that a love interest will appear in book 2 or 3, and our main heroine will get her love interest and she'll get away from this abusive relationship, but it just doesn't even happen, or doesn't even start to happen in book 1. So that was kind of one of my biggest qualms with it. Another thing is there's a really graphic sexual assault scene towards the end of the book, and the issue that I take with it is that our main character stops the sexual assault very easily with her magical powers. And I won't say any more than that because I don't want to spoil things. But she stops the perpetrator of the sexual assault very easily. But she lets the assault start and happen for pages and pages and pages before she uses her magical ability, which really bothered me. It's like, you let this other woman go through this because you didn't want to use your powers until it had already been going on for a while. So this was not for me. I can understand why other people like it. Maybe the romance ramps up in book 2 and 3 and 4, but it's just a series that I'm not going to continue. It is super readable and it's dark, but it's just not the dark romance for me. Next we have the Hellions Waltz, and this is book 3 in the Feminine Pursuits romance series. This is a historical queer romance about 2 women who are incredibly horny for each other but have zero romantic chemistry, which is basically all I need to say about this book for you to be clued in as to why I didn't like it. For me, my favorite types of romance books are ones where there's a really nice balance, and this was just completely imbalanced towards the sexual. And like, you know, get it, girls, like, go for it, do your thing, but they didn't have any emotionally intimate scenes with each other to convince me of a romantic relationship, not just a sexual relationship. So I love book 1 in this series. Book 2 was pretty good as well, not my favorite, and then book 3 was a pretty big letdown. So that's all I'll say on the Hellions Waltz. I would give it a try if you're interested in queer historical romance, but it's just not my fave. Then we have Yellow Jessamine by Caitlin Starling, and this is a novella, and it is about this woman who owns like a big shipping company, and gothic things start to happen to her, and she kind of runs away to her mansion and is kind of trapped in her mansion, and things start happening. It's very short, it's very gothic. The one issue that I took with this was that there's so much world building for a novella that I was kind of like trying to grasp the world building and also care about the characters. And I just think the author was trying to pack too much into a novella, and I don't think it was successful. I think if she had just said this was Victorian England and this woman owned a shipping company, it would have been fine, and I could have focused, the focus could have been more on the characters and the gothic elements and not all the extra world building. Another issue I took with this is that this is supposedly queer, but it is not good queer representation in my eyes, or it is the type of queer representation that I am not looking for, and that is the characters don't, it's two women, and they do not acknowledge their love for each other until one of them dies. It's like, oh, I was in love with you this whole time, but now you're dead. I just don't think that that is healthy representation, and not the type of representation that I'm looking for with a queer story. So again, not for me, but this is a very quick and short read, so if you're interested in gothic stories, maybe give this one a try. Simmer Down is a romance novel about two people who own competing food trucks, and they are fighting over like a prime food truck parking spot, and they decide to join a competition festival to determine who gets to park their truck in that spot. So whoever wins the festival gets to park their truck on the beach. This is set in Hawaii, and the reason I didn't love this is because I was hoping the competition aspect would play more of a role, the cooking aspect would play more of a role, but the focus of this one was more about the enemies to lovers nature of it, and basically the Twitter feud these two have going for each other. And I don't know, I just couldn't connect to it. I think it's worth a try. I think I gave this book like 3 stars. I don't think there was anything particularly bad about this book. It just didn't grab me. It didn't hold my attention. It didn't weave together the plot and the romance very well. It was kind of heavily skewed towards the romance, and the plot that we did get, a lot of it happens off page. So we just get like a summary. It's like, yeah, they won the festival, and then we move on to more romance scenes. So not the romance for me, but check it out if you're interested. Down Comes the Night is a young adult fantasy novel. It is his debut and a standalone, and this is bisexual. The main character has a relationship with a woman at the beginning of the book. We got a puppy joining us for this one, but she's being very sweet. So Down Comes the Night is marketed as a bisexual fantasy, and it is that. I just couldn't get behind her new romance. So she's in an established relationship with a woman at the beginning of the book, but when we meet the male love interest, I'm just not convinced that she's into him. And she immediately forgets about her previous love interest and has no conflicting thoughts about her. They are broken up at that point, but I just like couldn't get behind that like flip of a switch. There was no internal conflict about, well, I'm in love with Una, who's the previous love interest, but this guy's really hot and I want to pursue him instead. There was no internal conflict. And the fantasy elements were really weak in this book. I just could not get behind the overall plot as well as the characters. So worth a try if you're a young adult fantasy reader, but this one just kind of let me down both in the characters and in the plot. The Marriage Game by Sarah Desai is about these two people who end up renting the same office space above a restaurant, and they're basically competing for whose business is going to take over the office space. So it's a little bit of like another enemies to lovers situation. Again, I don't think this one was bad. It just didn't work for me. I just was reading it and I was like, I don't care. I know that's kind of a weak reason, and there isn't a particular like one thing that bothered me or something that just wasn't working, but I just didn't care. I didn't buy it. There is some interesting conversations about like family dynamics for Desi culture, Indian, like the main female character is an Indian woman, her whole family is Indian. So I liked the cultural elements in this book, but the romance, I was just like, just a 3-star. It's not doing anything wrong, but it's not doing anything right either. Now we're getting to ones that I have very strong opinions about. The Beauty in Breaking is a nonfiction memoir about a female doctor, and I think it's important to read stories from women, but she and we have conflicting viewpoints about the world, and that's okay. That's okay, but that doesn't make for an enjoyable book. You feel me? This book was really interesting because she talks about being a woman in a male-dominated industry, the toll that caring for sick people has for the industry itself, the toll that it took on her. But this woman, she's very faith-oriented, and that's good for her, but it felt pretty preachy to me as someone who isn't like that, and so we just didn't speak the same language. We just weren't vibing. Particularly, there's one chapter about a woman in the military who was raped by a commanding officer, and the doctor was talking about how she needs to forgive the rapists and to, move on with her life. And there were just the way that she was talking to this woman, I was not okay with. Not that there's anything wrong with forgiveness, but just the way that she was talking to this woman and this victim was not my thing, and I just had a pretty big problem with it. So I think it's an important book. People deserve to have their story told and read, but this philosophy, her faith just doesn't jive with me and doesn't make for an enjoyable read. The Wicker King by Kay Ankrum. Oh boy. I gave this 1 star. I really didn't like this book. It just was marketed to me as a fantasy about these two boys in a toxic relationship, and it does the toxic, abusive male-male relationship really well, but the fantasy elements are literally non-existent, and it just made for an upsetting and non-enjoyable read. So I really enjoyed Kay Ancrum's other book, which is The Weight of the Stars, which I think tackles some of these same subject matter better. So if you're looking for that type of relationship dynamic, I would just read The Weight of the Stars instead of The Wicker King. I couldn't get behind it. It just didn't do anything for me. In fact, it was quite upsetting. So yeah, we're just gonna keep going. The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. I wanted to love this so much. My friend loves this, and I just couldn't get past how boring it was. I know it says a lot of interesting things about gender in a time when androgyny and gender non-binariness was like not a thing, when those types of conversations were new. This is saying some really important things, but it doesn't do much for a modern lens reader for those types of conversations. I think you're better served reading non-binary authors who are writing right now instead of this. I think you can get the same type of philosophies written better and in a more entertaining way. I feel so bad. This is a huge book. It's like winner of the Hugo and Nebula awards for the best novel of the year. But it's so boring. And I think a lot of the concepts are really outdated. So, yikes. All right, the last book I'm going to talk about is A Sweet Mess. And this book is about a baker and a food critic, and the baker accidentally gives the food critic a cake that was supposed to go to a child's birthday party, and so it was kind of a silly cake, and the food critic took it seriously and was like really offended by getting this like monster cake and wrote a horrible review. But the baker comes to the critic and is like, that wasn't actually what you were supposed to get. Can you take your review down? And this guy's like, no, I don't. I stand by what I said, but in order to fix your bakery's reputation, you can come on my cooking show. So there's that. I know I'm sounding a little cynical when I'm describing the plot summary, but I don't want to give this book any grace. The reason I hated this book so much was like that weird power dynamic thing where the guy's like holding it over her head and he's not willing to take the review down. But they also start a romance. Obviously it's a romance book, and they break up, and then she finds out she's pregnant, and then he comes crawling back to her because of the pregnancy. And he apologizes for all of his misdeeds only because of the pregnancy. And I'm not okay with that. Like, I think you can do a pregnancy in a romance well, and this is a treatment of the pregnancy and the relationship in a way that I absolutely hated. He should have apologized before he found out about the baby. And the female heroine deserves better. Ugh, those were my 10 least favorite books of the year. And let me know if you're interested in any of these books or want to know anything more about these. I tried to do this video rather quickly. I don't want to wallow in the negativity, but you know, sometimes books just don't work for you. I read over 200 books this year. There are gonna be some duds. So I want to say thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video of mine very soon. Bye.